The Kansas wind carried the dusty tang of wheat stubble across the fields, a familiar scent that clung to Amos Harper's flannel shirt as he trudged toward the old equipment shed. At 62, Amos moved with the deliberate gait of a man who'd spent decades wrestling combines and coaxing life from stubborn soil. His family's farm, sprawled across 800 acres of Geary County, had been his world, until it wasn't. The Harper place hadn't turned a profit since the farm crisis of the 80s, and now it was just Amos, the empty house, and the ghosts of better days. He stopped at the shed, its sun-bleached boards groaning under the weight of time. The padlock was rusted, but Amos had no key to lose. He hadn't opened this door since his brother Caleb vanished 18 years ago, in the summer of 1997. Caleb, 2 years younger, had been the dreamer, always sketching irrigation plans or tinkering with the old Massey Ferguson tractor. Then one July night, after a heated co-op meeting, he was gone. No note, no trace, just his pickup left by the county road and a pair of work gloves folded neatly on the dash. The sheriff called it a runaway case. Amos never bought it. Caleb loved the land too much to walk away. For years, Amos had let the questions fester, but yesterday's find changed everything. While clearing out the attic, he'd stumbled on a leather-bound journal tucked inside a crate of 4-H ribbons. Caleb's journal. Its pages were filled with his tidy scrawl, notes on crop rotations, soil pH, and then, toward the end, something else, cryptic entries about the co-op secret and the North Field. One line, underlined twice, chilled Amos. They're hiding it in the grain. Now, standing before the shed, Amos clutched the journal. The North Field was fallow now, but in '97, it had been the co-op's pride, a bumper wheat crop managed by the Geary County Farmers Cooperative. Caleb had been their secretary, trusted with records. If he'd found something dirty, it explained why the co-op's president, Vernon Tate, had stonewalled Amos's questions back then. Vernon, with his tailored suits and grip like a vice, still ran the co-op, now a sprawling agribusiness with silos dotting the horizon. Amos pried the shed door open, the hinges screaming. Inside, dust motes danced in slants of sunlight. The Massey Ferguson sat like a rusted monument, its red paint chipped. Caleb's tools, a wrench, a grease gun, lay scattered on a workbench, untouched since that summer. Amos's chest tightened. He could still see Caleb here, whistling Wichita Lineman, smudged with oil. He shook off the memory and scanned the shed, the journal's words gnawing at him. The grain. What had Caleb meant? He moved to a stack of crates in the corner, where Caleb used to store spare parts. The journal mentioned a marker in the shed, something tied to the North Field. Amos lifted a crate, coughing as dust billowed. Beneath it, half buried in the dirt floor, was a small metal box, its edges corroded. He knelt, heart pounding, and pried it open. Inside was a folded map of the farm, hand-drawn by Caleb. The North Field was circled in red, with an X marked near the irrigation ditch. A note in the margin read, "Check the auger." The grain auger. Amos pictured it, a towering piece of equipment used to move wheat from the field to the co-op silos. In '97, it had been parked by the North Field, humming day and night during harvest. If Caleb had hidden something there, or seen something, it might explain his disappearance. Amos folded the map and slipped it into his pocket. He'd checked the ditch at dawn, before anyone noticed him poking around. As he locked the shed, a pickup's rumble broke the silence. Headlights swept across the field, and Amos squinted as Vernon Tate's silver Ford pulled up. Vernon stepped out, his Stetson casting a shadow. At 70, he still carried himself like a man who owned the county. "Amos," Vernon called, voice smooth as sorghum syrup. "Heard you were out here. Everything all right?" Amos gripped the journal behind his back. "Just checking the shed. Been a while." Vernon's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Nostalgia's a dangerous thing. You let me know if you need help with this place. Co-op's always looking to expand." The offer felt like a jab. Vernon had been after the Harper farm for years, offering to buy it cheap during the lean times. Amos forced a nod. "I'll manage." Vernon lingered, his gaze flicking to the shed. "You find anything interesting in there, you let me know. Old places hold all kinds of secrets." Amos's stomach twisted. Did Vernon know about the journal? He mumbled a goodbye and watched the truck disappear down the dirt road. The night felt heavier now, the wind carrying a faint rattle from the distant windmill. Back in the farmhouse, Amos spread the map on the kitchen table, its oak surface scarred from years of coffee mugs and harvest plans. The X on the North Field was precise, near the ditch where the auger once stood. He remembered that summer, how the co-op had pushed for record yields, how Vernon had bragged about new contracts with a feed company. Caleb had been uneasy, muttering about shortcuts at co-op meetings. Amos had brushed it off as stress. Now, he wondered. He poured a cup of black coffee and sat, the journal open beside him. A memory surfaced, Caleb at the county fair, 96, his grin wide as he showed off a prize heifer. They'd stayed late, sharing a beer under the Ferris wheel's lights, talking about keeping the farm alive. "We're stewards, Amos," Caleb had said. "This land's bigger than us." 2 years later, he was gone. Amos rubbed his eyes, the weight of 18 years pressing down. He'd start at the ditch tomorrow, but he needed help. Someone who knew the co-op's inner workings. That meant Ruth Carver, the retired agronomist who'd worked with Caleb in the 90s. Ruth, now in her late 60s, ran the diner in Junction City. She'd always been sharp, noticing things others missed, like soil compaction or blight patterns. If anyone could make sense of Caleb's notes, it was her. The next morning, Amos drove his old Chevy to Ruth's diner, the journal tucked in his jacket. The place smelled of bacon and fresh biscuits, its walls lined with photos of 4-H kids and vintage John Deere ads. Ruth was behind the counter, her gray braid swinging as she poured coffee for a pair of farmers. When she saw Amos, her eyes narrowed. "Amos Harper, you look like you've seen a ghost," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "Close enough." He slid into a booth, and she joined him, her gaze sharp. Amos lowered his voice. "Found something of Caleb's. A journal. Talks about the co-op and the North Field. You remember anything odd from back then?" Ruth's face tightened. Caleb was asking questions that summer. About the co-op's new fertilizer mix. Said the numbers didn't add up, too much nitrogen, not enough regulation. I told him to be careful. Vernon didn't like loose ends. Amos showed her the map, pointing to the X. He marked the irrigation ditch. Mentioned the auger. "You know anything about that?" Ruth frowned, tracing the map with a calloused finger. The auger was old, always jamming. But the co-op kept it running day and night that harvest. "I saw Caleb out there once, late, checking the grain flow. Looked worried." Amos leaned forward. "I'm going out there today. Will you come? I need your eyes." Ruth hesitated, then nodded. "Meet me at dusk. And Amos, watch your back. Vernon's got long arms." They parted, and Amos spent the day preparing. He packed a flashlight, a shovel, and Caleb's journal, its pages now dog-eared. At dusk, he met Ruth at the North Field, where the irrigation ditch cut through the earth like a scar. The auger was long gone, scrapped years ago, but the ditch remained, overgrown with weeds. The air smelled of damp soil and clover. Ruth knelt, examining the ground. "Soil's disturbed here," she said, pointing to a patch of uneven dirt. "Not natural. Someone's been digging." Amos started shoveling, his heart racing. The earth was loose, as if turned recently. 10 minutes in, his shovel hit something hard. He dropped to his knees, clawing at the dirt, and unearthed a small, sealed plastic bag. Inside was a vial of grain, dark and discolored, unlike any wheat he'd ever seen. A note in Caleb's handwriting was taped to it. "Test this." Proof. Before Amos could process it, headlights flared across the field. A truck roared toward them, Vernon's silver Ford. Ruth grabbed Amos's arm. "We need to go. Now." They scrambled toward Amos's Chevy, the vial clutched in his hand. Vernon's truck screeched to a stop, blocking their path. He stepped out, his face hard. "You're digging in the wrong place, Amos," he said, his voice low. "Some things are better left buried." Amos tightened his grip on the vial, Caleb's words echoing in his mind. "They're hiding it in the grain." Whatever Vernon was protecting, Amos was closer to the truth than ever, and it scared him to death. Amos Harper's Chevy rattled down the county road, the vial of discolored grain tucked in his jacket pocket. Ruth Carver sat beside him, her face taut as she glanced at the rearview mirror. Vernon Tate's silver Ford was still visible, its headlights cutting through the dusk like a predator's eyes. Amos's hands gripped the wheel, his knuckles white. The note in Caleb's handwriting, "Test this." Proof. Burned in his mind. Whatever was in that vial, it had cost his brother something. Maybe everything. "Turn left at the creek," Ruth said, her voice low but steady. "We'll lose him in the backroads." Amos veered onto a narrow dirt path, the truck bouncing over ruts. The headlights behind them faded, but Amos's pulse didn't slow. "He knew we were there," he said. "How?" Ruth's lips thinned. "Vernon's got eyes everywhere. Always has. Co-op's got half the county in its pocket, sheriff's deputies, grain inspectors, you name it." They reached a clearing near Willow Creek, where the air smelled of wet earth and wild mint. Amos killed the engine and pulled out the vial, holding it to the faint moonlight. The grains inside were dark, almost black, with an oily sheen. "This ain't wheat," he said. "Not any kind I know." Ruth took the vial, squinting. "Could be contaminated." Back in '97, the co-op was experimenting with new pesticides. Caleb thought they were cutting corners, using unapproved chemicals to boost yields. Said it was dangerous, but Vernon pushed it through. Amos's jaw tightened. He remembered Caleb's rants about the co-op's miracle wheat crop, how it grew too fast, too uniform. "You think this is what he found? Poisoned grain?" "Maybe." Ruth handed the vial back. "But we need a lab to be sure. I know a guy in Manhattan, Dr. Ellis, retired soil chemist from K-State. He's got equipment, owes me a favor. We can trust him." Amos nodded, but his gut churned. Vernon's warning, "Some things are better left buried," felt like a threat carved in stone. He started the truck, heading for Ruth's diner to regroup. The journal and map sat on the seat between them, Caleb's words a silent guide. Amos couldn't shake the image of his brother in the north field, alone, checking the auger under the stars. What had he seen? At the diner, the late-night crowd was thin, just a trucker nursing coffee and a farmer reading the Junction City Union. Ruth locked the door and pulled the shades. She spread the map on a table, pointing to the X by the irrigation ditch. Caleb marked this for a reason. The auger was right here, moving grain to the co-op silos. If they were hiding something in the harvest, that's where it'd be. Amos opened the journal to a page dated July 10, 1997, 2 days before Caleb vanished. The entry was rushed, ink smudged, found residue in the auger's chute. Black, oily. Not natural. Vernon knows. Meeting him tonight. Amos's throat tightened. He confronted Vernon. That's why he's gone. Ruth's eyes darkened. Or it's why Vernon made sure he was gone. But why keep it quiet? If it was just bad grain, they could have burned the crop, written it off. Unless it wasn't just the grain, Amos said. What if they were shipping something else? Hiding it in the harvest? Ruth leaned back, her braid catching the dim light. Smuggling? Through the co-op? That's a stretch, Amos. But Caleb was poking around the silos, too. Said they were storing more than they reported. Amos's mind raced. The co-op silos loomed over the county, silver giants that held thousands of bushels. In '97, they'd been running at capacity, trucks rolling out day and night. If something was hidden in the grain, drugs, chemicals, anything, it could have been shipped across state lines, no questions asked. He needed to see those silos. "Tomorrow," he said. "We checked the co-op's old records." "You still got access to the office?" Ruth snorted. "Not since I quit in '99. But I know someone who does, Lila May, the bookkeeper. She's been there 30 years, hates Vernon's guts. She'll help, but we'll need to be careful. Vernon's got cameras now." Amos pocketed the vial and journal. "I'll meet you at dawn. Bring Lila." As he drove home, the night pressed close, the windmill's creak echoing across the fields. The farmhouse was dark, its windows like empty eyes. Inside, Amos lit a kerosene lamp, avoiding the electric lights. He spread the map again, tracing the irrigation ditch. A memory surfaced, Caleb at the county fair, '97, his face tense as he argued with a co-op board member in the livestock barn. Amos had been too busy with the tractor pull to listen. Now, he wished he'd paid attention. Sleep wouldn't come, so he sat at the kitchen table, the vial beside him. He thought of Caleb's gloves, left in the pickup, folded like they were waiting for him. A knock at the door jolted him upright. It was past midnight. He grabbed a tire iron from the hall and cracked the door open. It was Jimmy Tate, Vernon's nephew, a wiry man in his 40s who worked as a farmhand for the co-op. His eyes darted, nervous. "Amos, we need to talk. It's about Caleb." Amos's grip on the tire iron tightened. "What about him?" Jimmy glanced over his shoulder. "Not here. Meet me at the old windmill, 2 a.m. I know what happened that summer. But you gotta trust me." Amos studied him. Jimmy had been a kid in '97, barely 20, always trailing Vernon like a shadow. Could he know something? Or was this a trap? "Why now?" Amos asked. "'Cause I'm tired of lying," Jimmy said, his voice cracking. "And you're stirring things up." Vernon spooked. "Be there." He slipped into the dark before Amos could answer. Amos checked his watch, 12:45 a.m. He didn't trust Jimmy, but he couldn't ignore the lead. He grabbed his flashlight, the vial, and Caleb's journal, then headed for the windmill, a rusted relic near the north field. The night was still, the air heavy with the scent of alfalfa. He moved quietly, sticking to the shadows of the hedgerow. At the windmill, Jimmy waited, pacing. His truck was parked nearby, engine off. "You came," he said, relief in his voice. "Talk," Amos said, keeping his distance. Jimmy rubbed his neck. That summer, Caleb was asking about the grain shipments. "He found something in the auger, same as you did, I bet. Vernon told me to keep quiet, said it was just a bad batch. But I saw the trucks. They weren't going to the usual buyers. Late night runs, no paperwork." Amos's pulse quickened. Where were they going? South, maybe Texas. I didn't ask questions. Vernon paid me to load the trucks and shut up. Jimmy's eyes dropped. Caleb was gonna blow the whistle. Then he was gone. Amos stepped closer, the tire iron heavy in his hand. "You saying Vernon killed him?" Jimmy flinched. "I don't know. I swear. But after Caleb disappeared, Vernon gave me a raise, told me to forget what I saw. I was young, scared. I'm sorry, Amos." Before Amos could press him, a low rumble broke the silence. Headlights flared from the field, a black SUV, not Vernon's truck. Jimmy cursed. "That's not good. Run." Amos bolted for the hedgerow, Jimmy behind him. The SUV accelerated, tires crunching gravel. Amos dove into the ditch, heart pounding, as the vehicle roared past. He caught a glimpse of the driver, a man he didn't recognize, face shadowed. Jimmy wasn't so lucky. The SUV swerved, clipping him. He hit the ground hard, groaning. Amos crawled to him, but Jimmy waved him off. "Go. They'll come back." Amos hesitated, then ran, the vial digging into his chest. He reached his truck, lungs burning, and sped toward town. The SUV didn't follow, but the message was clear, someone wanted him stopped. He thought of Caleb's note, proof. And the dark grain in his pocket. Whatever Caleb had uncovered, it was bigger than a bad harvest. And Amos was running out of time to find it. Amos Harper's truck idled in the pre-dawn shadows behind Ruth's diner, the vial of dark grain heavy in his pocket. His hands still shook from the encounter at the windmill. Jimmy Tate's crumpled form haunted him, hit and left groaning in the dirt. Amos had called 911 from a payphone, keeping it anonymous. He couldn't trust the sheriff, not with Vernon's influence over the county. The journal and map sat on the passenger seat, Caleb's handwriting a silent accusation. "They're hiding it in the grain." Whatever it was, it had drawn blood again. Ruth slipped into the truck, her face grim. She carried a thermos of coffee and a worn ledger, its cover stamped with the Geary County Farmers Cooperative logo. "Lila came through," she said, tapping the ledger. "Snuck this out of the co-op office last night. It's from '97, shipping records." Amos nodded, his throat tight. Jimmy Tate talked. Said Caleb found something in the auger, and the co-op was running secret shipments south. Then someone ran him down last night. Black SUV, no plates. Ruth's eyes widened. "Jimmy's alive?" "For now. Called it in, but we can't wait for the law." Amos started the engine. "What's in the ledger?" Ruth flipped it open, her finger tracing faded ink. "Grain shipments from the North Field, July '97. Most went to legitimate buyers, feed companies, mills. But there's a dozen entries marked special order, no destination listed. Just initials, VT. Vernon Tate," Amos muttered. His grip tightened on the wheel. "We need to test that grain. You talked to your chemist friend? Dr. Ellis is expecting us. He's got a lab at his place outside Manhattan. If this grain's contaminated, or worse, he'll know." Ruth paused, her voice softening. "Amos, you sure about this? Whoever's in that SUV isn't playing." Amos thought of Caleb, his laugh echoing across the fields during harvest, his boots caked with Northfield dirt. "I'm sure." The drive to Manhattan took an hour, the Kansas horizon glowing pink. Dr. Ellis's place was a modest farmhouse with a converted barn housing his lab. The man himself, a stooped figure in his 70s with wire-rimmed glasses, greeted them at the door. His hands were stained with soil, like he'd been testing samples at dawn. "Ruth Carver," he said, smiling faintly. "Still stirring up trouble?" "Only the good kind," Ruth replied, handing him the vial. "We need this analyzed. Fast." Ellis held the grain to the light, frowning. "Odd color. Let's see what we've got." He led them to the barn, where microscopes and spectrometers lined the walls. The air smelled of chemicals and old wood. Amos clutched Caleb's journal, its weight grounding him as Ellis worked. While the chemist ran tests, Amos and Ruth pored over the ledger. The special order shipments were logged late at night, often after co-op hours. Weights were inconsistent, some loads far heavier than standard grain hauls. Amos's mind flashed to Jimmy's words, late-night runs, no paperwork. He flipped to a journal entry from July 8, 1997, checked the silo after midnight. Bags inside, not grain. VT was there. He saw me. Bags, Amos said, tapping the page. Not grain. They were moving something else. Ruth's brow furrowed. Could be anything, chemicals, contraband. But why hide it in a silo? Before Amos could answer, Ellis called them over. His face was pale. This isn't just contaminated wheat. It's laced with a synthetic compound, organophosphate, highly toxic. Used in some illegal pesticides banned in the 90s. Exposure could cause neurological damage, even death. Amos's stomach dropped. Enough to kill someone? Ellis nodded. If ingested or inhaled in high doses, absolutely. This sample's concentrated. Looks like it was mixed deliberately. Ruth exchanged a look with Amos. Caleb found this, she said. That's why he was poking around the auger. He must have suspected the co-op was spreading it. And Vernon covered it up, Amos added, his voice hard. Maybe killed him for it. Ellis adjusted his glasses. There's more. I found traces of another substance, narcotic precursor, likely ephedrine. Used to make methamphetamine. This grain was a carrier. Amos's head spun. The co-op wasn't just poisoning crops, they were smuggling drugs, hiding them in wheat shipments. Caleb had stumbled onto a criminal operation, and it cost him everything. We need proof, Amos said. Something tying Vernon to this. Ruth tapped the ledger. These shipments. If we trace where they went, we might find who was buying. Ellis offered a USB drive. I've digitized my findings. Get this to someone you trust. But be careful, organophosphates aren't cheap. Whoever's behind this has money. Back in the truck, Amos's mind raced. The ledger, the vial, the journal, they were pieces of a puzzle, but he needed more. We checked the silos, he said. Caleb mentioned them. If they're still hiding something, it'll be there. Ruth hesitated. The co-op's locked down tight now. Vernon's got security, cameras, guards. We'd need a distraction. Amos thought of Lila May, the bookkeeper. Can Lila get us in? Maybe. She's got keys to the office. But we'll need to move fast, before Vernon knows we're onto him. As they drove back to Junction City, a memory surfaced, Caleb at the kitchen table, 97, sketching the Northfield's irrigation system. They're cutting corners, Amos, he'd said, his voice tight. It's not just the crops. It's bigger. Amos had been too tired from baling hay to listen. Now, he saw the fear in Caleb's eyes. At the diner, Lila May waited in a back booth, her silver hair pulled into a bun. She was 65, with a smoker's rasp and a glare that could curdle milk. You're stirring a hornet's nest, she said, sliding a key across the table. This gets you into the co-op office. Don't expect me to hold your hand. Amos pocketed the key. What do you know about 97? The special shipments? Lila's eyes flicked to the door. Vernon ran those himself. Always at night, always cash. I saw him once, loading bags into a truck with some out-of-towner. Big guy, scar on his neck. Never saw him again after Caleb disappeared. Amos's pulse quickened. The man in the SUV last night, had he been scarred? He couldn't be sure. Thanks, Lila. Stay low. That night, Amos and Ruth approached the co-op under cover of darkness. The silos loomed like sentinels, their metal gleaming faintly. The office was a low brick building nearby, its windows dark. Amos used Lila's key, slipping inside with Ruth behind him. The air smelled of dust and old coffee. File cabinets lined the walls, stuffed with decades of records. Ruth started searching, her flashlight beam dancing across folders. Amos headed for a locked drawer labeled Archives. He jimmied it open, revealing a stack of yellowed invoices. One caught his eye, a shipment dated July 11, 1997, marked VT Special. The destination was a warehouse in Laredo, Texas. No buyer listed, just a phone number. Got something, Amos whispered, showing Ruth the invoice. Before she could respond, a crash echoed outside. Flashlights swept the yard, and heavy boots crunched gravel. They're here, Ruth hissed. Amos stuffed the invoice into his jacket, heart pounding. They ducked behind a desk as the door rattled. A voice, low, unfamiliar, barked orders. Check the office. They're not getting away. Amos gripped the vial in his pocket, Caleb's note echoing, proof. The truth was close, but so were Vernon's men. He whispered to Ruth, we split up. Meet at the creek. Go. Ruth nodded, slipping toward a back window. Amos waited, pulse hammering, as the door swung open, revealing a man with a scarred neck and cold eyes. The same man from the SUV. Amos held his breath, knowing one wrong move would end it all. Amos Harper crouched behind the co-op office desk, his breath shallow as the man with the scarred neck stepped inside. The stranger's flashlight beam swept the room, glinting off file cabinets and the dusty linoleum floor. Amos clutched the invoice from July 1997 in one hand, the vial of tainted grain in the other. Caleb's journal, tucked inside his jacket, felt like a lead weight. Outside, Ruth's footsteps faded as she slipped through the back window, but Amos was trapped. The scarred man's boots thudded closer, his shadow looming. "Check every corner," the man growled into a radio. "They're here somewhere." Amos's mind raced. The invoice, marked VT Special, with a Laredo, Texas, destination, was a lifeline to Caleb's disappearance. He couldn't let it fall into the wrong hands. He slid the paper into his boot, praying it wouldn't crinkle. The scarred man paused, his light lingering on the open archives drawer. Amos held still, sweat beading on his forehead, the scent of old coffee and mildew thick in the air. A second set of boots entered, lighter, quicker. "Nothing outside," a younger voice said. "You sure they're here, Ray?" "Ray." The scarred man's name. Amos filed it away, his heart pounding. Ray grunted, kicking a chair aside. They tripped the silent alarm. "Keep looking." Amos's stomach sank. He hadn't seen any alarm system. Someone had tipped them off. Maybe Lila May wasn't as loyal as Ruth thought. Ray's flashlight swung toward the desk, and Amos pressed himself lower, the vial digging into his chest. Caleb's note flashed in his mind, "Test this." Proof. He couldn't lose it now. The radio crackled. "Ray, Silo 3's gates open. Looks like someone tampered with it." Ray cursed, his boots pivoting. "Lock it down. I'll finish here." The younger man left, and Ray's light lingered, scanning the desk's edge. Amos's muscles screamed, but he didn't move. After an agonizing moment, Ray strode out, the door slamming behind him. Amos exhaled, crawling to the window. He climbed out, landing softly in the gravel lot. The silos towered above, their steel curves catching the moonlight. Ruth waited at the creek, her face pale. "You okay?" she whispered. "Barely," Amos said, pulling the invoice from his boot. "Got this. Laredo, Texas. Vernon's special shipment." Ruth's eyes narrowed. "Laredo's a border town. Perfect for smuggling, drugs, chemicals, you name it." Amos nodded, the pieces clicking. Caleb had found tainted grain laced with a narcotic precursor, hidden in co-op shipments. Vernon was moving it through the silos, using the harvest as cover. But why kill Caleb? To silence him, sure, but there had to be more. "They mentioned Silo 3, Amos said. "We need to look." Ruth grabbed his arm. "Not now. They're crawling all over. We go to Ellis first, get the USB drive to someone who can use it." They slipped through the fields, the wheat stubble crunching underfoot. The air smelled of dust and distant manure, a reminder of harvest nights with Caleb, hauling bales under the stars. Amos pushed the memory down. No time for nostalgia. At the creek, they reached Amos's truck, hidden in a copse of cottonwoods. He drove to Dr. Ellis's farmhouse, the horizon graying with dawn. Ellis was waiting, his lab light still on. He took the USB drive with his analysis of the grain, organophosphates and ephedrine, and copied it to a second drive. "I've got a contact at the EPA, he said, his voice low. "They'll want this. But it's dangerous. The co-op's got pull, and Vernon's not working alone." "Who's Ray?" Amos asked, describing the scarred man. Ellis frowned. "Sounds like Ray Gorman. Used to be a trucker for the co-op in the 90s. Rough guy, did Vernon's dirty work. Disappeared after 97, same as Caleb." Amos's chest tightened. "He's back. And he's hunting us." Ellis handed over the second USB drive. "Get this to the EPA in Kansas City. I'll call my contact, set up a meeting. But watch your back, Ray's not the type to bluff." Amos and Ruth drove to Junction City, the invoice burning a hole in his boot. At the diner, they found Lila May wiping down tables, her face unreadable. Amos didn't trust her, but they needed answers. "Lila," he said, keeping his voice even, "who's Ray Gorman?" Lila froze, her rag still. "Where'd you hear that name?" "Saw him last night," Amos said. "At the co-op." "Who is he?" Lila glanced at Ruth, then sighed. "Vernon's fixer. Handled the special shipments in 97. Caleb caught him loading bags in the silo one night. Asked me about it, but I told him to drop it. Next thing, he was gone." Amos leaned in. You knew and didn't say anything? Lila's eyes flashed. I had a kid to raise, Amos. Vernon paid my bills. You think I wanted to end up like Caleb? Ruth put a hand on Amos's arm, calming him. Lila, we found an invoice. Laredo, Texas. What was Vernon shipping? Lila hesitated, then spoke softly. I never saw the bags, but I heard rumors. Chemicals, maybe drugs, mixed with the grain. Vernon had buyers across the border. Caleb was gonna tell the feds. Amos's blood ran cold. Caleb, always the idealist, thinking he could take on the co-op alone. A memory hit him, Caleb at the 97 County Fair, standing by the cattle barn, his face pale as he whispered about dirty money in the co-op. Amos had laughed it off, blaming the heat. Now, he saw the truth. We need to get to Silo 3, Amos said. Caleb mentioned it in his journal. If there's evidence, it's there. Ruth shook her head. Too risky. Ray's watching, and Vernon spooked. We get the USB to the EPA first, then hit the silo. Amos didn't like it, but she was right. They left the diner, the USB drive in Ruth's pocket. As they climbed into the truck, a black SUV rolled into the lot, Ray's. Amos floored it, tires spitting gravel, but the SUV stayed close, its engine roaring. The chase tore through Junction City, past the feed store and the old 4-H hall, where Caleb's prize heifer once won a ribbon. Hold on! Amos shouted, swerving onto a dirt road flanked by cornfields. The stalks towered, their tassels swaying in the dawn light. The SUV gained, its bumper gleaming. Amos's mind flashed to Caleb's gloves, folded in the pickup, waiting for a harvest that never came. He couldn't let this end the same way. He spotted an irrigation canal ahead, its bank steep. Ruth, brace yourself. He yanked the wheel, skidding toward the canal. The truck slid, kicking up dust, and stopped inches from the water. The SUV overshot, fishtailing into the corn. Amos didn't wait, he gunned the engine, heading for the highway. They reached Kansas City by noon, the EPA office a squat building near the river. Ruth's contact, a brisk woman named Carla Ruiz, met them in a conference room. She plugged in the USB, her face grim as she read Ellis's report. This is explosive, she said. Organophosphates and ephedrine in commercial grain? We'll need more to nail Vernon, physical evidence, witnesses. Amos pulled out the invoice. This ties Vernon to Laredo. And there's a silo at the co-op, number 3. Caleb thought they were hiding something there. Ruiz nodded. We'll get a warrant, but it'll take time. Stay low until then. As they left, Amos's phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Stop digging, or you're next. He showed Ruth, his jaw tight. Ray. She grabbed his arm. We're not stopping. But we need to be smart. Silo 3, tonight. We end this. Amos nodded, the weight of Caleb's journal steadying him. The silo held answers, or a trap. Either way, he was ready to face it, for his brother's sake. Amos Harper's truck rumbled along the backroads of Geary County, the Kansas night thick with the scent of alfalfa and looming rain. Ruth Carver sat beside him, her flashlight trained on Caleb's journal, open to a page dated July 9, 1997, Silo 3, midnight. Saw bags again. VT and RG arguing. Something's wrong with the grain. The vial of tainted grain, the Laredo invoice, and the USB drive with Dr. Ellis's analysis were stashed in a lockbox under the seat. The threatening text, stop digging, or you're next, still burned in Amos's mind. Ray Gorman was closing in, but so was Amos, and Silo 3 was the key. We're walking into a lion's den, Ruth said, her voice low. Vernon's got guards, cameras. If Ray's there, we don't have a choice, Amos cut in. The EPA's moving too slow. Caleb left us the map, the vial, the journal. The truth's in that silo. Ruth nodded, her gray braid catching the dashboard light. Lila's meeting us. She's got a key to the silo gate, but she's scared. Said Vernon's been asking about her. Amos's grip tightened on the wheel. Lila May's loyalty was shaky, her story about Ray and the 97 shipments checked out, but her hesitation at the diner nagged at him. Was she playing both sides? He pushed the thought aside, focusing on the plan. They'd slip into the co-op yard, check Silo 3, and get out before Ray or Vernon's men spotted them. The EPA warrant was coming, but Amos couldn't wait. Caleb's gloves, folded in that abandoned pickup, haunted him, a promise unkept. They parked a half-mile from the co-op, near a fallow wheat field. The air was heavy, the distant rumble of thunder mixing with the creak of a windmill. Amos carried a crowbar and flashlight. Ruth had a bolt cutter and a grain probe, a tool she'd used in her agronomist days to test silo contents. Lila waited at the co-op's perimeter fence, her face pale under a hooded jacket. She handed Amos a rusted key. Silo 3's on the east side, she whispered. Guards patrol every hour. You've got 20 minutes. You coming? Amos asked, searching her eyes. The barn's leaky roof dripped onto Amos Harper's shoulder as he crouched in the shadows, the low hum of an engine outside growing louder. Rain lashed the fields, the storm's roar masking the sound of Ray Gorman's SUV circling like a wolf. Ruth Carver gripped her grain probe, her eyes locked on the barn door. The lockbox under the truck seat held Caleb's journal, the vial of tainted grain, the Laredo invoice, and the ledger from Silo 3, proof of the Geary County Farmers Cooperative smuggling and Caleb's murder. Amos's heart pounded. 18 years after his brother vanished, the truth was within reach, but so was Ray. He's close, Ruth whispered, her voice steady despite the tension. We can't stay here. Amos nodded, clutching the crowbar. The ledger's final entry, CH problem resolved, confirmed Vernon Tate had ordered Caleb's death. The co-op had been smuggling ephedrine-laced grain to Laredo, hiding a drug operation in plain sight. Caleb, with his stubborn sense of right, had gotten too close. Amos wouldn't let it end here, not with Caleb's gloves still folded in that abandoned pickup, a silent call for justice. The engine cut off. Silence fell, broken only by the rain and the creak of the barn's timbers. Amos gestured to a side door, half hidden behind hay bales. We make for the river, he said. Lose him in the corn. They slipped out, the storm soaking them instantly. The cornfield stretched ahead, stalks swaying like sentinels. Amos led, the ledger tucked inside his jacket, the vial in his pocket. Lightning flashed, revealing Ray's silhouette near the barn, his flashlight sweeping. Amos and Ruth ducked low, weaving through the corn, the wet leaves slapping their faces. The Smoky Hill River was a quarter-mile away, its banks swollen from the storm. A shout cut through the rain. Harper! Ray's voice was raw, closer than Amos expected. A gunshot cracked, splintering a stalk nearby. Ruth grabbed Amos's arm, pulling him faster. They reached the riverbank, its muddy slope treacherous. Amos's boots slipped, but he caught himself, the crowbar digging into the earth. There. Ruth pointed to a rusted drainage pipe under the bridge, half submerged. They scrambled inside, the cold metal slick against their hands. The river roared outside, muffling Ray's footsteps. Amos's chest heaved, the ledger's weight a reminder of what was at stake. He thought of Caleb at the 97 County Fair, his face lit by the Ferris wheel, promising to save the farm. We're stewards, he'd said. Amos had failed him then. Not now. Ruth checked her watch. Dawn's in an hour. We get to Kansas City, give Ruiz the ledger. It's enough for a raid. Amos nodded, but the crunch of gravel stopped him cold. Ray was on the bridge above, his flashlight probing the bank. You can't run forever, Harper, he bellowed. Hand it over, and maybe you walk away. Amos's jaw tightened. He whispered to Ruth, stay here. Before she could protest, he climbed out, crowbar in hand, and crept along the bank. Lightning lit Ray's scarred face, his gun glinting. Amos moved silently, years of stalking coyotes on the farm guiding his steps. He lunged, swinging the crowbar at Ray's knee. The man howled, stumbling, his gun skidding into the mud. Amos tackled him, pinning him against the bridge's iron frame. What did you do to Caleb? He growled, the crowbar at Ray's throat. Ray spat, his eyes cold. Your brother was a fool. Snooping in the silos, taking samples. Vernon said he had to go. Where is he? Amos pressed harder, the metal biting Ray's skin. Northfield, Ray choked out. Buried by the ditch. Vernon's orders. Amos's vision blurred, rage and grief colliding. He wanted to end Ray, but Ruth's hand on his shoulder stopped him. We need him alive, she said. For the EPA. Amos tied Ray's hands with his belt, leaving him slumped in the mud. They ran for the truck, the storm covering their escape. By dawn, they reached Kansas City, delivering the ledger, vial, and USB drive to Carla Ruiz. She scanned the documents, her face grim. This is enough for a federal investigation. Vernon's finished. Amos wasn't done. He drove back to the Northfield, Ruth beside him, as EPA agents and sheriff's deputies, ones not in Vernon's pocket, swarmed the co-op. Guided by Ray's confession, Amos led them to the irrigation ditch. They dug, the soil yielding a rusted toolbox. Inside were Caleb's work gloves, a monogrammed belt buckle, and bones, human, weathered by time. Amos sank to his knees, the gloves in his hands, their leather cracked but still folded, just as Caleb left them. The EPA raid uncovered more, hidden compartments in Silo 3, bags of ephedrine, and records tying Vernon to a cartel in Laredo. Vernon was arrested, his tailored suits traded for cuffs. Ray turned state's evidence, spilling decades of secrets. The co-op collapsed, its assets seized, the tainted grain destroyed. Amos stood by the north field a week later, the windmill creaking in the distance. He held Caleb's gloves, the ache in his chest softer now. A memory surfaced, Caleb at a barn dance, 96, twirling a girl under string lights, his laugh carrying over the fiddle. Amos had been too shy to join in, but Caleb pulled him onto the floor, saying, "Live a little, brother." Amos smiled faintly, tucking the gloves into his pocket. He sold the farm to a young 4-H couple, keeping only the shed with the Massey Ferguson. The land deserved new stewards, untainted by Vernon's greed. Amos moved to a small house in Junction City, near Ruth's Diner, where they shared coffee and stories of better days. The north field was replanted, its wheat clean, swaying under a clear sky. Justice wasn't joy, but it was enough. Caleb's truth had grown, like a harvest long overdue.